All right, so we're being recorded. Welcome to the Monterey Friends of Jung. Again, we have a presentation by Eileen Murphy, MD, who is going to tell us about The Secret of the Golden Flower by Richard Wilhelm and a foreword by C.G. Jung.
Okay, I thought about doing this presentation a couple months ago, and it didn't strike me as particularly daunting because I just skimmed the text. I didn't know how very much Eastern esoteric philosophy it contained. And I had a lot to learn since I've never strayed far from Western philosophy. I read several books and reduced this talk to a manageable amount, but a few days after I finished, I was struck by the thought that maybe there isn't so much to learn, or at least there's ways of learning it better. Maybe it is very simple. Also, I wondered about its relevance in light of current events. What relevance does ancient Chinese philosophy have in a world that seems to be shattering? And I don't know the answer. I do know that these Chinese philosophies were born around 500 BCE, and it was a time of the warring states. There was chaos in China for about 300 years before China was unified. And this, strangely, was the fertile ground for many philosophies in China. And maybe they arose from desperate attempts to reduce conflicts. Certainly the Tao does not predispose to conflict or conquest. In terms of Eastern philosophy, it's not as convoluted as Western philosophy can be, but it's more difficult in another sense because a lot of Eastern philosophy is incommunicable or inscrutable. And I came to understand in part that one learns it by living it and meditating on it. To live according to the Tao and Wu is difficult, having to do with not knowing and with acceptance, and it also has to do with humility. There were some well-worn phrases from Samuel Beckett insistently that came to mind after I reviewed my outline in terms of current events, and I was not sure whether the phrases fit, but they insisted. In Beckett's play, Waiting for Godot, a character says, "I can't go on." And the companion replies, "That's what you think." Yes, we are very, very adept at going on. Beckett's more famous lines are from a late short story, shortly before his death. He says, "Ever tried, ever failed? No matter. Try again, fail better, fail worse again, till sick for good, throw up for good, we're neither for good." And that is also what we humans do. We fail. Beckett's words are not about achieving something concrete. It's not a rallying cry, as many have taken it. In a shortened version, it has become a Silicon Valley mantra: fail better. But it is about trying and knowing there will be failure, however we define failure. And Beckett was preoccupied with failure of the human endeavor, and many people are feeling this lately. So at the outset, following Beckett, I want to emphasize the role of acceptance and of not knowing in Chinese philosophy, in contrast to a lot of Western philosophy. Mostly in its long history, Western philosophy has been focused on grand concepts like reason, the will, God's role, and freedom, large active systems of thought. Only recently, Western philosophy has assumed a more humble role, more aware of what we cannot know. So late 20th century philosophy renounced systematic knowledge of the noumena, reality itself. And although Western philosophy acknowledges the power of science, it also acknowledges science as a system that can generate predictability, not knowledge of the absolute. And that's another matter entirely. Nevertheless, Western philosophy is still very rich, and I think of it as being the right hand where Chinese philosophy is the left hand. So this is preamble to discussion of Chinese thought. My talk will be informative about the history and types of Chinese philosophy and Jung's reaction to it, but mindful that Chinese philosophy is a way of life, something to aspire to, maybe not as the sole aim of life, but certainly something to be incorporated into a well-lived life or a wise one. To start, The Secret of the Golden Flower is a scroll very dear to Jung because it transformed his psychology. It's a Chinese esoteric text of only 44 pages. Jung's commentary at 55 pages are longer, but the 44 pages are densely packed with Chinese metaphysics. It writes of the Tao, the I Ching, alchemy, and also of meditation, and the latter with instructions and diagrams to explain the meditation aspect. But first, a quotation from The Secret of the Golden Flower to give an idea of the text. The secret of the golden flower is the light. One uses it as a symbol. It is the true energy of the transcendental Great One. It is the golden elixir of life. And the term golden elixir of life refers to the state of immortality. In future, I'll refer to the secret of the golden flower as the golden flower. There are two types of immortality. The sage can become immortal and live up to 800 years old. The spiritual adept can truly become immortal, but only in spirit. The golden flower, the text, is recognized as one of the most important Taoist classics. It was written in the 18th century, but the oral tradition probably dates to 8th century CE. As to the text itself, it's not smooth or sequential. It's cryptic, scattered with wisdom sayings, fragments of alchemy, and directions on the proper way to meditate. It randomly mixes the Tao, I Ching, and alchemy. And to follow along with the mashup of these three philosophies is not as difficult as it seemed to me on first pass, and that's because the three philosophies are really intimately connected. Two key concepts underlie all three, that of spiritual energy flow and the union of spirit and matter. These are the two connectors. The meditation work in the Golden Flower aims for inner rebirth through circulation of the light. And meditation is described only in the first stages, and it's believed that the latter portions of the manual have been lost. An ingredient with all three philosophies within the Tao, I Ching, and alchemy is the light, chi energy or life energy. Similarly, the goal of meditation is to move the force the life force throughout the body so as to attain spiritual growth. This spiritual growth could be wisdom via the Tao, knowledge of the future via the I Ching, or longevity via alchemy. So spiritual progress is the goal. And it's aligned with Jung's, who once said, we live in order to gain the greatest possible spiritual development and self-awareness, even though we find ourselves in the middle of an experiment we have not set up. Indeed. All three of these Chinese philosophies, again, it's the Tao, the I Ching, and the alchemy, unfold within the One, which gives rise to Yin and Yang. A major philosophy not discussed in the Golden Flower is Buddhism, probably because it was introduced into China more than 800 years later than the above philosophies. Confucianism is a worldly philosophy for living, and that's neglected also. In terms of page count, the art of meditation has the most page count. Meditation precepts are accompanied by illustrations. So we can see already it's a major difference between Eastern and Western philosophies. In the East, the material and immaterial worlds, the inner and outer, interact. Like yin and yang, they are not separate as they are in Western philosophy. I'm going to intersperse poems and also clips of Chinese martial arts throughout. I use Chinese poems throughout as poetry is an excellent way to fill out the metaphysics. And Chinese poetry is beautiful in its own right. The poems written in the 8th century Common Era are accepted as some of the greatest poetry ever written. Here's a Tufu poem, By the Winding River. Every day on the way home from my office, I pawn another of my spring clothes. Every day I come home from the riverbank drunk. Everywhere I go, I owe money for wine. History records few men who have lived to be 70. I watch the yellow butterflies drink deep of the flowers, and the dragonflies dipping the surface of water again and again. I cry out to the spring wind and the light and the passing hours. We enjoy life such a little while. Why should men cross each other? Next, to talk about the martial arts, I'm going to show you clips from the I Ching Bagua throughout. This is not only to keep you from falling asleep, but it's very relevant since I Ching Bagua is a martial art arising directly from the I Ching. And the I Ching is the most ancient book of Chinese wisdom dating back to 2000 BC. To the Chinese, it's equivalent in value to our Bible. My friend Alfredo Balaban, a martial arts exponent, agreed to demonstrate movements tonight. I'll give a brief intro to martial arts now. Martial arts were very important in China. For the martial artists of I Ching Bagua, the goal is to align physical strength with internal strength. Later on, I'll explain a further relationship to the I Ching, because it's quite complex. There are two kinds of martial arts, each responding to the yin and the yang. For the practitioner of internal martial arts, such as I Chi and I Ching Bagua, it's about using one's body to advance spiritual qualities, and as well as for defense. Acts of physical strength and grace parallel advances in character. In this way, it's similar to alchemy, where the mental tracks the material. Alfredo will demonstrate I Ching Bagua, the internal art. It can be quite violent, but fortunately, the opponent tonight, his opponent, is invisible. So we're safe. Then there are the external martial arts, its yang aspect, and that's focused on defeating one's opponent. For example, Shaolin Kung Fu. It's hyper-masculine and won't be demonstrated tonight for the safety of those of us in McGowan House and for McGowan House itself. So Alfredo will first demonstrate the difference between yin and yang style of movements. Every martial art has both aspects, but Abagua emphasizes the yin. And we want the first clip only.
Okay, hang on.
Yeah, that one.
How do you express yin and yang energy in martial arts? I'll show you a couple demonstrations.
Yin is a softness. When I go forward, come in with an entering strike. This yang energy. If I retreat, that is yin energy. I'm absorbing. In Wing Chun, we have combinations as well, using yin and yang together. Bruce Lee's famous 1-inch punch comes from Wing Chun. So that is the looseness of the bond. If your target, this tightens up. You can see that all the yang energy is here. The rest of the body maintains that yin energy. So we look at something like this. All the concentration is here. Fist at the point of contact. So also in Wing Chun, you have Bong Sa, which is the flex punch. It's captured by the Tan Sa. This is over here. Then I can come in strongly, yang energy, and entering strike. So we have here, going back, coming back, two-handed push, yang energy with this lotus pump. That's it.
That was exciting, wasn't it? Back to sedate Jung. Jung was struck by the balance of opposites, yin and yang. He wrote, the Chinese recognize yin, the dark, feminine, earthbound principle with its emotionality and instincts that reach far back in time. But they also recognize the light and spirit yang, which includes intellect and feelings as well. The Chinese mind is not so one-sided as the Western mind. He says, quotes, when opposites balance each other, it is a sign of high culture. One-sidedness is a mark of barbarism. Back to the text itself, the Golden Flower is one of the few Taoist classics to discuss the golden elixir of life. Recall that refers to immortality. So it's the true philosopher's stone. The idea of it dates back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, a poem from Mesopotamia written about 2000 BC. The epic is regarded as the earliest surviving notable literature, and it is there that the protagonist realizes that the nature of death. So when the Golden Flower describes the text as being analogous to the golden elixir of life, it is aligning itself with very ancient human aspiration to immortality. And here is the paradox. There may be acceptance of the pains of life, but not of mortality itself, at least in the philosophy of alchemy, Chinese alchemy. So the symbol of the golden flower is a bright image, or mandala, you can see it. And the practitioner of meditation will see that image between his eyes after developing or along with developing the art of meditation. When the image surfaces between the eyes, it's a sign that he's entering into the immortal essence. Oh, this mandala reminds me, Jung, mustn't forget Jung. It is a Jung group, so I need to sketch the actual philosophies that he is going to react to. Jung said even before exposure to Chinese philosophy, he was predisposed to it and had actually incorporated some of its aspects into his psychology without knowledge of the Chinese source. The Jung quotes that I will use, are from his commentary in the book, The Golden Flower. And now to Chinese metaphysics. The philosophies in the Golden Flower tend to have one major aim, which is harmony and a still mind. For the Taoist, the aim is transcendence of quotidian reality to a space of harmony with nature. Human spirit and nature are intimately aligned. For the alchemist, it is also alignment of processes in the material world with the spiritual world in the pursuance of wisdom, longevity, or immortality. For the exponents of the I Ching, the goal is wisdom through divination, knowing the future and understanding change via the 8 trigrams of I Ching. I'll talk about the 8 trigrams later, but they represent the 8 fundamental aspects of nature. Just to give you an idea of it. Oh, I don't know, you can't see it.
Yeah, just
A trigram is a trigram, and they have unbroken lines and broken lines, and each of these trigrams, this is a trigram, represent an aspect of nature, like thunder or lake, fire, mountain, wind. And also these trigrams will relate to Bagua, I Ching Bagua, because each of the trigrams represents an animal in the Bagua. So we'll get to that later. Let's see, and now we can get to a poem. Li Po was writing at the same time as Tu Fu, and that's the 8th century CE. And both Tu Fu and Li Po were Taoists. Both drank a lot of alcohol. In fact, most of the many Chinese poets I've read extolled the joys of alcohol. And as well as being enjoyable, alcohol had a practical use. It enabled the overactive thinking mind to let go, to access the Tao, to live Wu Wei. Wu Wei is being in the flow, the creative state. So I'd like a little wine myself right now.
Sorry. I have a bottle in the car.
But outside of alcohol, how can one spontaneously try to be, how can one be spontaneous? How can one try to be spontaneous? And that's the paradox of Wu Wei, the genuine paradox. How to try not to try. In trying, you activate the part of your brain that you're trying to shut down. So that's where alcohol helps. And that's where habituation helps. Wu Wei must become second nature. So back to Li Po, He was a wandering poet in the court of the emperor, but he gave up his exalted position to continue his wandering life. Eventually, he fell intoxicated into a river and drowned. This is one of his best known poems, Drinking Alone Beneath the Moon. Drinking alone beneath the moon, among the blossoms, a single jar of wine. No one else here. I ladle it out myself. Raising my cup, I toast the bright moon, and facing my shadow makes friends three. Though moon has never understood wine, and shadow only trails along behind me, kindred a moment with moon and shadow, I've found a joy that must infuse spring. I sing and the moon rocks back and forth. I dance and the shadow tumbles into pieces. Sober, we're together and happy. Drunk, we scatter away into our own directions, intimates forever. We'll wander carefree and meet again in star river distances. Okay, back to I Ching Bagua. Recall that Bagua is a mental as well as physical discipline, akin to Chinese inner alchemy. And as in meditation, it's a matter of focusing the light or qi energy to achieve the goal. The motions that Alfredo will demonstrate tonight are effective means of violence, but in another aspect, are effective means of healing, because the very same pressure points used to injure are the pressure points used to heal. So it's a tension of opposites. Alfredo will demonstrate next circle walking. A unique feature of Bagua is circle walking, which has roots in the circle walking of shamanistic traditions. It's a meditation practice, and circular walking has to do with the cycles of birth, life, and death.
So this is number 2.
Yeah. It's harder than it looks. It's really difficult to get that perfect form. Jung, as well as yin and yang, Jung was surprised to find many other symbols in the golden flower that paralleled psychic states. Some to mention the mandala, or squaring the circle, alchemy's sequence of symbols reflecting psychic progress, the Taoist symbology of Wu Wei, the 8 trigrams of I Ching, and enantiodromia, the concept that at extremes opposites meet. He was struck with other insights. Quotes, "They are insights from the ancient cultural life of China, which has grown from the deepest instincts and which is remote from us and impossible for us to imitate. We must not imitate, but hold up our own culture, which is sick. And recall he wrote this in 1928 between world wars. Relating the text to his psychology practice, he found it extraordinary that within Eastern wisdom, there was a living parallel to events in the psychic development of his own patients. It showed him that the human psyche has a common substratum, despite differences in culture and consciousness. It explained the similarity of myths and symbols, and it led him to conclude that there are roots reaching back to the deep past of humanity, regardless of culture and ethnicity. He named that common substratum the collective unconscious, which is the psychic expression of identical mind structure within humanity. A grand insight. Here are more of his insights on Eastern versus Western outlooks. In the West, he says the powerful and independent consciousness and will force the unconscious into the background. Consciousness then obtains Promethean freedom. Therein lies the danger of hubris or inflation. The wise Chinese would say, in the words of the I Ching, when Yang has reached its greatest strength, the dark power of Yin is born within its depths. A breakdown often follows, one-sidedness. Reflecting on World War I, he pondered how reasonable beings could be transformed into savage beasts. Quote, "We in the West are constantly living on the edge of a volcano and will destroy everyone in reach. In contrast, the Chinese have an all-inclusive consciousness, a unity of personality." Of course, Jung does recognize that the China of his day is not the China of the Golden Flower. He was very much impressed by the concept of Wu, the art of letting things happen, because it also aligned with his psychology. He said, "We must let things happen in the psyche. Consciousness is forever interfering and never letting the growth of psychic processes in peace. Events must be allowed to happen so that a new attitude is created, one that accepts the non-rational and the incomprehensible." We'll go back now to I Ching Bagua, and Alfredo, here are some more background to I Ching Bagua. I said how it uses the formal template of the I Ching by the 8 trigrams. Bagua is another word for trigram, and the I Ching is composed of 8 primary images, which I showed you. The straight line represents the yang, and the broken line represents the yin. Each, as I showed you, each represents an integral aspect of nature. They are symbols of inner psychic processes. Now, Alfredo will show the first animal, which is the unicorn.
So that is a demonstration of the unicorn animal, which has 3 broken lines. Broken line at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom in the trigram. So, but the idea behind that martial arts is that you're loose. You're loose. The top line is going to represent the foundation. That's over here in the foot. Then the knees is the middle line. And this area here, more the middle area is the middle line. And then the top, of course, is the last line. So they're all broken. That means that you're moving with looseness, not tension. We normally see a lot of martial arts, they move with a lot of tension. It doesn't have to be that way. you can do a soft strike and really hurt somebody. Like this is the soft eye poke that we did, the last one. It's not gonna gouge somebody's eye out, but it's gonna hurt and it could set you up for the next move because they're going like this. We started out with what I call this umbrella move. And the strike is coming, moving out of the way like this. Open up the opponent, you have the snap kick, and this is striking the temple. And you'll notice the joints are all loose here. Look at the wrists, how they fling, the elbows, the shoulders, everything is loose, the whole body's loose, the waist. So that again is unicorn. Thank you.
That was nice. More than nice. It's a little history of the golden flower. The golden flower came from an esoteric circle in China. I recall it was first, found in the scroll in the 18th century, but it was transmitted orally from the 8th century CE. And its author is thought to be a Taoist sage, Lu Tzu. It was presented to Jung in 1928 by Richard Wilhelm, a sinologist and wisdom seeker. He was able to obtain a rare copy, which he translated into German. And since he admired Jung's work, he selected him to be the psychological commentator. The golden flower emphasizes meditation, but the meditation yoga it talks about is mind technique. And in addition to quieting an unquiet mind, it's a spiritual process. The goal is to unite, which was split off at birth, the conscious mind from the unconscious. Thereby it produces an integrated higher consciousness. And it's based on the idea that mankind is a microcosm and is not separate from the macrocosm. The psyche and the cosmos are to each other like the inner and the outer world. Here is another Taoist poem. This is from the 9th century by Su Tong Pu. It's called The Weaker the Wine. It's really hard to find one that doesn't deal with wine. The weaker the wine, the easier it is to drink 2 cups. The thinner the robe, the easier it is to wear it double. Ugliness and beauty are opposites, but when you're drunk, one is as good as the other. Ugly wives and quarrelsome concubines, the older they grow, the more they're alike. Live unknown if you would realize your end. Follow the advice of your common sense. Avoid the imperial audience chamber. It is no greater accomplishment to be a rich corpse or a poor one. Jewels of jade and pearl are put in the mouths of the illustrious dead to conserve their bodies. They do them no good. They feed the robbers of their tombs. As for poetry, it is its own reward. Now we go back to I Ching and Alfredo. We're going to do number 4 and number 5. Number 4 is dragon and number 5 is squaring the circle, which is a Jungian concept.
So in Bago, we do have hexagrams. That is a combination of 2 trigrams. The first one is the dominant one. Here I'm going to demonstrate dominant trigram with dragon and the secondary trigram with unicorn, which is the 3 broken lines. What we're going to do is we're going to square the circle.
This one, Pure Dragon?
It'll be number 5. Oh no, it'll be, yeah, number 5. When?
This is for a dragon system in Bagua. And the trigram is the bottom line is solid, the middle line is broken, the top line is broken. So what that means is you're really rooted on the ground. And we have this looseness, this wave-like motion you'll see in a lot of strikes, the middle section, and more looseness in the top too. So you have this kind of look here. And with the arm, think of this as the bottom line, this elbow here as the center line, the wrist is the top line. This is solid, this is broken, this is broken. How that translates is the strike, like this pushing strike. You're touching here, there's a follow through, the power comes from the shoulder. So when we fight in Bagua, we encourage people to go around the opponent, to not try to be in the line of fire. So the dragon system will look like this.
Okay, now some more information about the effects of the golden flower on Jung. It came at a crucial time for him, 1928, because he'd been investigating the process of the collective unconscious, trying to get it together since 1913, following his break with Freud, and he was at an impasse. Upon reading The Golden Flower, he found it not only a Taoist text of meditation, but also, crucially for him, an alchemical tract. In the alchemical aspect, he found material crucial to the development of the collective unconscious. He was led from there to European medieval alchemy, which further advanced his psychology. In his book, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, Jung wrote, "Light on the nature of alchemy began to come to me only after I had read the text of the Golden Flower." Overall, he was deeply impressed by the East's strangeness. Again, he contrasted it with rational Western thought. Science must serve and works harm only when taken as an end in itself. The East shows us another, more profound understanding. Quote, "I see it as understanding through life itself, from the inside out. Eastern inwardness is so deep that detachment can occur. These people have so fulfilled the instinctive demands of their natures that little prevents them from viewing the invisible essence of the world for fulfillment of instinctive demands, rather than fear-born repression of the instincts," which is an obvious dig at Freud. He complained of the Westerners of his time who tried to imitate the Eastern ways of being, but from a shallow understanding. Quote, if the wrong man uses the right means works in the wrong way. We need to build up our own culture, which suffers from 1,000 ills. The Westerner needs a higher level of consciousness so as to downgrade psychic problems in order that they lose their significance, because problems don't go away, they just don't matter as much. The most important problems in life are all, in a certain sense, insoluble. They can never be solved, only outgrown. Fate seldom or never corresponds to conscious expectation. One needs cultivate the art of ue, of letting things happen. The light rotates according to its own law. The art of letting things happen in the psyche, action through non-action, is not conscious willing. Jung extends that to letting fantasies happen, the active imagination. He says, by Wu Wei, a new attitude is created, one that accepts the non-rational. When things come to us, we must understand them from the ground up, new values added to old. It's a question of taking one's own self as the most serious of tasks, of being conscious of everything one does, and of keeping it before one's eyes in all its dubious aspects. It is a task that taxes us to the utmost. The Chinese person has his culture aligned with him, but the Westerner has culture aligned against him in its intellectual and religious aspects. Okay, and now to another Taoist poem. It's by I Ching, 3rd century. It's about the deserted wife. And women did not write poetry in these times, but a lot of poetry was written by men in the voice of women. So this is the deserted wife, 3rd century CE. A pomegranate grows in the front courtyard, green leaves shimmering light blue green, cinnabar blossoms flashing red, all glittering variously like brilliant jade, radiant splendor, thinking like jewels. It could be the abode of pure magic. Some birds come flying and alight, flapping their wings and sadly crying, and why? Because the cinnabar blossoms bear no fruit, beating her breast and deeply sighing, without a son, she must return to her parents. With a son, she's the moon crossing the heavens. Without a son, she's like a shooting star. And now, can I have the clip of the snake and the phoenix? It's number 6 and 7.
Snake, Bagua Zhang. Broken line, looseness there. Unbroken here in the elbow. And broken in the shoulder. So that means in snake, what we're seeing is this constant movement. You'll see this wrist turn like this, where the palm is facing down or the palm is facing up. It's not just for a strike. If it is for a strike, it's for a soft spot. Neck, the eyes, for example. So it looks like for deflection, punch comes in, deflect here. Cross punch comes here, I deflect here. Switch arms, control that arm, and eye jab. So let's look at that again. Now, I could fake the eye jab. I don't have to do it. I can come around. It's grabbing his shoulder, bringing him down. Or I have this. I can poke. I can go down with my elbow. Come forward with an extension strike.
See, you don't have to do an eye jab. I mean, some people insist on eye.
That is what? That is Phoenix system in the in-style Bagua. What we have here is the wing. So this is the unbroken line here in the shoulder. That way we're able to generate a lot of speed. And here you see I have structure here with some tension, and here too. You can see when you look at a bird's wing, you have that bend in the middle. This is a little different than when a bird is probably more like this. We turn it up like this because this is where we strike from. So, some of the strikes. We have this point of contact here, and we have that transforming force. That's an outside dodging strike, inside dodging strike, coming to a chop, push, arcing chop, back to an inside dodging strike, and my favorite, this one, which is the bird's beak.
We're gonna practice that later. I just have some words about the I Ching. It's the most ancient Chinese philosophy dating to 2000 BC. And the main theme of the I Ching is like that of the Tao, which is everything is in process of continuous change. The literal meaning of Ching is Tao, truth, or change. I Ching says the truth of heaven is also the truth of humanity. It's an organic whole. Of the I Ching, Confucius said, if some years were added to my life, I would dedicate 50 years to study the I Ching, and then I might come to be without great fault. The I Ching is a work of poetry and wisdom, and it also includes commentary in my version, a commentary by Confucius. And when used in divination, the seeker of future knowledge is not passive. Her question to the I Ching must be specific, and she must bring her chi energy into the throw of the dice. Her intention energy affects the outcome. So divination is therefore not based on randomness. Of interest to Jungians, there's an ancient Chinese object called a Kong made of jade. The oldest specimen comes from around 2000 BC. It depicts a circle within a square with a central hole. It is actually a mandala in stone, and it was often buried with the dead. It has some historical connections with the contemporaneous I Ching. And since ancient times, the square represents the earth and the circle represents heaven. So we can see tracks of Jung all over the place here. Now we can go to clips 8 and 9. This would be monkey and rooster. Oh, that's monkey. And this is rooster. Okay.
Yeah, here come the rooster. So the rooster has the broken line here in the elbows only. What does it look like? Well, it could be someone's trying to tackle me and move out of the way. And I can come forward and charge with this rushing strike. Or it could be that someone's coming. Oh, so strong. Just move around them. No. Easier is when they come in. And all I got to do is push their arm out of the way to come forward. So, a lot of this, but it doesn't have to be with two hands. I come with one hand. This, coming down, up, down. Maybe if there's the reverse strike like this, segue into other animal movements. That is rooster.
In the actual movements, the 8 animal form is not about choosing animal moves consciously. It's like the moves choose you depending on the context. So it's like instinctual. It's like a free form dance. I want to quote another sentence from the Golden Flower. All holy men have bequeathed this. Nothing is possible without contemplation. Confucius says, perceiving brings one to the goal. Buddha calls it vision of the heart. Lao Tzu, sage of Taoism, calls it inner vision. The author of Golden Flower says it is all the same. but it is definitely not the same, because at around 500 BC, the West, as represented by Greece, and the East, as represented by China, went on divergent paths. This is the time of what the philosopher Karl Jaspers called the Axial Age, 600 to 500 BCE. And it's astonishing how many ancient philosophies were developed at around the same time. Tao, Confucianism, Buddhism, and also Heraclitus, Plato, and Aristotle were developing their philosophies, and Zoroastrianism was coming along. It's thought that the sudden blossoming of thought was related to the rise of agrarian societies at that time, so people had leisure to speculate when not warring. Starting with Plato, the West is being likened to a sharpened blade. Western reason and science value the precise and definitive, form without shadow, the known and the named. Insight in the West has more often meant instances of revelation than a consistent, durable attitude. Apollo is the god of clear form, patron of classical order. Dionysus is the god of intense energy and the transforming chaos, the patron of turbulence and revolution. Both are esteemed as masculine, neither is quietist. The East took another path. Ancient India and China accepted the primacy of the unnameable and the imprecise. The essences of Taoism and Buddhism are the vortex and the void, respectively. In common is a search for a harmony which is modest and moderate. Ancient China valued the feminine, the yin, although definitely they did not value female people. Now we're ready for some more Bagua. Bagua, the next is monkey and rooster.
No, we just did those two.
Oh, okay, then the next is I don't know.
Oh, we have one.
Whatever comes next. It's lion. Yeah, lion.
That is very much yang energy that you see in lion. It's very powerful. Upper body, midsection, lower body. So that kind of strike is easy, but maybe not as easy as it looks. One, it's not this. That doesn't work too well. You want to put your momentum into it. You want to make it one move, come at once. And you're blocking here with this hand. What you're aiming for, someone is coming in with this haymaker, and you're aiming for here. It's an acupuncture point, it hurts. So another one that we have in style Bagua, for a defensive move, we move in a circular way. We have a sweeping strike. Do that again. So we not just move the arm, we want to gauge that hip. And then we come in to the neck with this clothesline.
And the next one?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I can look
I
it
think it was bear.
up. Oh, bear, yes.
Okay, we're going.
He almost ran you over there.
That one wasn't the bear. The
Oh.
first one was the lion. The second one was a mixture of moves. So it was just a martial arts configuration of several.
Oh, should we go back and look
Oh
for?
no, the bear is gonna come up later.
Oh, okay.
Pretty sure.
Maybe.
Let's see. I can yeah, I'm still going on with the Tao, but not a whole lot. A lot of people know about the Tao Te Ching. Its author is Lao Tzu, and nothing much is known of him. He may not have existed. The work is likely a compilation of ancient wisdom. There are many interpretations and translations of the Tao, and I prefer that of the poet Stephen Mitchell. And I'll just have some of his words in a minute. Though people think of the author Lao Tzu as a hermit and a dropout, this perception of quietism probably comes from his concept of wu wei, literally not doing. But an example would be an athlete whose body performs the right movement effortlessly without the conscious mind. The game plays the game, the poem writes the poem. We can't tell the dancer from the dance. This is wu wei, the purest and most effective form of action. Nothing is done because the doer vanishes into the deed, and this nothing is in fact everything. Lao Tzu writes, the Tao cannot be articulated. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. It's like Feynman's quote on quantum physics. If you think you understand quantum physics, you don't understand quantum physics. So here is Li Po talking about the Tao. On gazing into a mirror, follow Tao and nothing's old or new. Lose it and the ruins of age return. Someone smiling back in the mirror, hair white as the frost-stained grass. You admit lament is empty. Ask how reflections get so worn and withered. How speak of peach and plum? Timeless South Mountains blaze in the end. Then now I think we're on to the last of there might be Bear. I hope Bear's coming up.
Here, let's try this one.
Where? Yeah, that's
For
good.
the bear system, for Bagua Zhang, we have the top line is unbroken. And then the lower lines, middle line, and bottom line are broken lines. That means we're very top heavy. Jack Dempsey used to say, you get a very powerful punch, you need to move the opposite shoulder back. It's a lot more power than just a jab. So what we do, like what I like to call the Papa Bear, we have one of these strikes comes in. And I'm striking here with this part of the palm. This is the hard part, where I have flexibility here coming in with the elbow, the shoulder. This, the Papa Bear. The Mama Bear is going to strike with the back side of the shoulder here. You'll see some pronation coming in, and you're sinking down, and you're striking here. The Baby Bear, I like to say, is the shocking strikes. The punch comes in, you're using both hands. So you can see that I'm using this part to strike. Otherwise I can strike here. So you saw the Papa Bear, the Mama Bear, and the Baby Bear in the bear system for Bagua.
Maybe we won't do any more yet. I'll save the other two for later. I wanted to mention the Taoist principle of the uncarved block because it's so beautiful. The essential meaning of the words uncarved block is that things in their original simplicity contain their own natural power. And this power is lost when that simplicity is destroyed, as when the block is carved carelessly. The world of 10,000 things refers to everything we pick out as an object and label and then attempt to alter. Tao says all healthy living being, including all creation, is made up of yin and yang, the harmonious union of opposites, wholeness. And wholeness, as you know, is another key concept of Jung's. Yin and yang proceed from the Tao. The yin stands for the north side of the hill, the shade, yang for the south side, the shine. Yin stands for the south bank of a river, the moon and the female sex. Yang stands for the north bank, the sun and the male sex. And it is essential to possess the proper balance of yin and yang within each of the two sexes. So here is another echo in Chinese philosophy of Jung with his anima and animus. Most people know of Lao Tzu, but not many know of the second most renowned Taoist, Chuang Tzu. And he's writing in the 4th century BC and probably did exist. He wrote poetically and with humor, and I enjoyed reading him a lot. While Lao Tzu advocated removal of the self from the world of 10,000 things, Zhuangzi said it was too late for that. One must live in the world but find freedom there. He says a free man does not accept conventional standards. Poverty is as desirable as affluence, death as indifferent as life. Unlike Lao Tzu, he remains within society, but maintains the state of wu-wei and merges with the Tao. He expresses it in a prose poem. The Tao is like the wind blowing here and there. It makes various sounds as it blows into holes of different sizes and shapes. The shape and size of the hole determines the sounds. The sounds are all of the 10,000 things existing in the universe. It is the emptiness of the holes that create the sounds and makes them distinct. But at the same time, everything is just the wind itself. The wind expresses itself in various melodies. A light breeze brings a small harmony, while a powerful gale makes for harmony vast and grand. And once the wind has passed, all the holes return to their silent emptiness. Live according to the Tao. Don't attach to knowledge of any kind, because any knowledge is based on language, and language can never express reality. There is a famous Taoist story about Chuang Tzu. One morning he woke up after dreaming of a butterfly. He didn't know, was it he dreaming of the butterfly or was the butterfly dreaming of him? And here is Li Po again, poeticizing Chuang Tzu's famous parable of the butterfly dream. Chuang Tzu dreams he is a butterfly, and a butterfly becomes Chuang Tzu. All transformation is one body. Boundless occurrence goes on and on. It's no surprise that eastern seas become western streams, shallow and clear, or the melon grower at Qing Gate once reigned as Duke of Tung Ling. Are hopes and dreams any different? We bustle around looking for what? And then let's just do, I think there's 2 more clips of Bhagavad. Thank you. Maybe not, huh?
This one or the water?
Yeah, that's a water one.
Do the water one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Going.
Oh, we did
I
that
think we
one.
did that one,
So,
Okay,
that's
so-
okay, that's a good one. Try,
There's just one more. I think
okay,
there's this one.
that should be on the, yeah, on the mound, the bird. I don't know if you can guess the animal that was. Can you guess what animal that was? No? It was a bear on the mound. It was a bear. Anyway,
Another bear.
so I'll end now with some brief comments on alchemy, since it was so important to Jung. In ancient Chinese alchemical practices, compounding the elixir has two primary meanings. In the first, the elixir is obtained by heating physical ingredients in a vessel. This is external alchemy. In the second sense, the ingredients of the elixir are components of the human being, where the entire process takes place within a person. This is internal alchemy. And then there is the mixed process, where external alchemical processes are accompanied by rites and ceremonies that facilitate the internal process of healing and transcendence. The first allusions to the actual practice of Chinese alchemy date from the 2nd century BCE. And the first emperor to die from alchemy was also in the 2nd century BCE. Many emperors, nobles, and officials died from taking the elixirs. Numerous alchemists received capital punishment for their failures. But despite the deadly elixirs, Chinese alchemy was practiced for millennia. In general, Chinese alchemy was more concerned with medicines for longevity and immortality than the making of gold. The text of the Golden Flower writes of alchemy as an inward process and scoffs at those who try to create gold. Quote, "Worldly people do not understand. In the work of transformation, they see it as a means of making gold. Is not that foolish?" It's interesting that gunpowder came out of China's alchemical practices. And during the Tang Dynasty, 9th century alchemists experimented with sulfur and saltpeter combined with charcoal and accidentally found gunpowder. And it was quickly put to use against the Mongols. Around 900 CE was when it seemed to be first used, and it remained a monopoly of the Chinese until the 13th century, when it passed along the Silk Road and made it to the West, soon in the 13th century. So this is the end of my formal presentation, and many thanks to Alfredo for his excellent Bagua demonstration. So by now we